Hello, Jen Gerson.
Hello, Macaroni.
So, anything
Oh,
happened this week?
I'm gonna tell you a funny story.
Oh, my
I
goodness.
went to an event, a client appreciation event for our lawyers. Our lawyers held, uh, and I got some wine and some chicken wings. I was very happy. And while I was there, I was introduced to someone who said, "Hey, are you with Matt Gurney's thing?"
You sure are.
So there's a little bit of everyday sexism there for you. For the record, this is Matt Gurney and Jen Gerson's thing. We are
No, and I
co-founders of the line.
no, and like let it never say I don't value you. You're pulling in a solid 85% of what I'm making here. That's really good.
Yeah, I've basically maxed out. I've hit the glass ceiling. It's fantastic. Pretty soon you'll be the CEO. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud
Well,
to see how far you've come.
well, I'm proud of you too. Um, so, well, first of all, I will say this. You might have had to deal with a little everyday sexism. You also got wings.
Oh no, I massively got to take advantage of the fact that our lawyers are based in Calgary to take advantage of a really spectacular client appreciation night. Got
We
chicken
have
wings, they had flatbread, they had
we have a
some.
lot of lawyers.
It's true, more than one would think. But anyway, and they had a carving station
Mm.
with cheesy potatoes. It was great.
For the record, everyone, we do operate on a 100% equal policy here. Whatever I make, she makes. Whatever she makes, I make. We've
Which is
even
funny
settled
because
up.
you definitely do work more than me.
Yeah, but you make us look good.
No,
So
there's no question. I bring the sparkle, bring the
sparkle,
shine.
yeah. It's funny. The sparkle. That's a funny expression. I used that expression this week too on someone. I was using it extremely non-literally, but um. So there's two big things to talk about. Do you want to talk about Johnston or you want to talk about Alberta first? We're talking about both.
Let's start with Johnston.
So I don't think I have anything left to say about the report beyond what was in my column. The only couple of things that I would add to that were just not worth putting into a column that was already long enough because they were more like observations. So let me rattle off a couple of observations and then I have a few more substantive things to talk about it, but purely in the realm of observations. I didn't talk at all about Johnston's press conference, except like I kind of mentioned in the column. Oh, that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I will be more specific here, and anyone who thinks I'm being unfair to the special rapporteur here, because I think he is drawing a lot of unfair partisan criticism, and I don't want to do that. But the press conference was a catastrophe. It was
Okay.
a bad press conference. You and I have talked a lot about in different contexts how certain people are not adapting to the new normal of
Mm-hmm.
being in a really nasty polarized era.
Mm-hmm.
Johnston,
And one in which deference would be the automatic assumption.
yeah, and Johnston has written an op-ed in the Globe and Mail, which came out on Friday. I would imagine it's for it was either in Friday's paper or it will be on Saturdays. I'm not sure, but anyway, I read it
Mm-hmm.
online. Anyway, it was fine. Like I don't think it's going to change any minds, but what it was what should have been his press conference's opening statement. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for everybody for gathering here. Read the op-ed. Like it was a fairly measured, concise summary of what he found, why he was asked to do it, and what should come next. If that had been the start of the press conference, things might have gone differently. But what instead we got was 5 minutes of a guy like being kind of pissed off that people had questioned how much time Justin Trudeau had spent when they were at each other's respective cottages. Like it was, you said a minute ago that we live in an era that is not much for deference, and you're right. It's even less for deference when those looking for the deference are not reading the room. And the former governor general was not reading the room there. So that's one observation. The other observation I want to make, and I'll put this to you before I get to my more substantive ones. We've had the Johnston first report. We've had the press conference. Now we've had the op-ed in the Globe and Mail. Plus, he's met with the Toronto Star editorial board. He's done some interviews. He's doing the normal things you do. What the fuck happens the next time the Globe, Global News, anybody else drops a bomb that just blows this thing wide open again? I don't know if the prime minister is eventually going to be able to avoid calling a public inquiry.
Well, this is something that I was trying to make, a point I was trying to make in my column, is that once again, this is a classic example of being tactically smart but strategically dumb. He calls a special rapporteur that comes in and tries to discredit all the media reports. He hides behind the rapporteur's essential eminence. Just a second. He hides behind the eminent rapporteur's essential eminence in order to do this sort of grubby work. He manages to declare victory. We're vindicated. We're considering bringing Han Dong back in. Hey, maybe these leaks were malicious. He wins one day's news cycle, and then things fall to shit by day 2. Tactically smart, strategically dumb, because you're right, nothing about this report actually gets to the root of the problem, solves anything, wins the Liberals anything more than one win news cycle, and inevitably more is going to come out, more is going to drop.
I mean, not literally inevitably, but that's my guess.
Yeah.
And I would also say
all of the messaging to the intelligence services has been, this government is going to continue to put its head in the sand for a host of political and probably economic reasons. And so the only answer, if you take this real seriously, is to continue doing what you've been doing, because it's the only thing that's generating results for you.
There's an interesting side debate going on right now, and I've been engaging in some of the brush fires on online in it, which is basically leaker, morally virtuous angel, or Pierre Poilievre acolyte. Like, I don't think it matters. Like, I am like leakers, whistleblowers, whatever you want to call this guy. They often have agendas. What matters is not the agenda of the leaker; it's the veracity or otherwise of the information.
Yeah.
And I know that Johnston's report, and this is one thing I think he erred in his report, has given, I don't think it's given people the impression, but I think it's given people the ability to pretend they have the impression that Johnston's report has substantially or even in total reversed the narrative of the leaking here. Johnston claims, with particular reference to Han Dong, one of the allegations against Han Dong, that the allegations are false. Other times he says they lack context. Others he doesn't question at all.
And nothing is explained about what Han Dong was doing talking to the consul, which is now on the record as having happened.
I just,
and why was he there?
True,
and why and why did he not report that to the Prime Minister's office? So, like,
I think, no, you're not wrong about that, but the point I was making was just a different one here. Johnston has declared like one specific report to be false. He has listed others as said they lack context, and others he has not commented upon.
Right.
And in at least one instance, the government of Canada has substantively acknowledged the accuracy of the leak because we kicked a Chinese diplomat out.
Yes.
So there's a mixed bag here, and I think that's been missed. This is, as always, a more nuanced situation than anyone screaming at each other on the internet wants to admit. It's complicated, it's ugly, it's messy. There was something interesting that kind of came out of the conversation. It was Thomas Juneau, academic intelligence expert, one of the relatively few genuine intelligence experts we probably have in this country, who I believe has written for us before as well. He had an interesting comment, and I'm not gonna dump on him here. This is no way a criticism, because I substantively agree with the comment, but I've been thinking about it, and I think I want to tinker with his semantics. So Juneau had pointed out that we live in a country that is sort of, because of our geopolitical environment, we have not had to prioritize national security considerations.
Yeah, okay.
And that's something probably I've written 1 billion times in my columns over the last 15 years. It's an accepted truism. I would even go so far as to say it's true. But I've been thinking about it this week. I want to bounce an idea off you here. And I inflicted this on my radio show listeners a few days ago. I was kind of thinking the idea out loud. think we're characterizing that wrong.
Okay.
Because I think the analysis is correct. We have been spared the necessity of having a really active national security cadre in our country because we don't have natural predators in the neighborhood. That's true. But I think when we characterize the problem as therefore there's sort of a lack of expertise, I dropped my pen, as there's a lack of expertise. Yeah, but one of the things is that I think this has gotten to the point, in fact, where we have an almost hostility to it. Because as I said on my radio show, we also, as a country, probably don't have a ton of botanists or bicycle mechanics or amateur astronomers or pastry chefs. But if you were to make that point, like if as a matter of national purpose, we decided we needed more astronomers or botanists or chefs, I don't think that would be controversial. But anyone over the last 15, 20, 30 years who's been saying we need more national security types, we need more intelligence types, we need more military types, kind of everything that fits broadly under the umbrella of national security, people look at you and go, what are you, fucking American? Botany, pastry cooking, astronomy don't trigger our anti-Americanism in the same way that national security conversations do.
Is it anti-Americanism or a sense of sort of complacency and peacenickiness that has ingrained itself into the national character?
I don't think it's anti-Americanism in the sense of like Yankee go home, but I think it's reflexively anti-Americanism in the same way that we can't talk about healthcare in this country. It's because, well, they do it one way and therefore we shall do it the other. The Americans really care about this stuff, therefore we won't. To care about it is to be American.
I don't know if it's an anti-Americanism. I think it's actually just naivete. I think that most of us are insulated, comfortable, and complacent, and we choose to live in the concept of the world that is that, and we don't want to have to live in a different kind of world. And if all of a sudden you have to start hiring scary people and doing scary things
and talking about scary
scenarios, then your illusions of safety, trust, and deference get punctured pretty quick, right? And I just don't think anybody here wants to do that, and we don't have to. So why do we do that? We kind of have I don't know, there's probably some literary equivalent where we all kind of have the luxury of living in Lotus Land. And as long as we have the luxury of living in Lotus Land, nobody wants to hear from the person who's like, maybe these flowers are not great.
Well, I mean, imagine how weird people would have looked at someone at like first class dining hall on the Titanic on April 11th if they were like, I was counting the lifeboats and I don't think there's enough.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Like, everybody's having a nice time.
We're having dinner.
We're having dinner.
What are you doing?
Like, the food's lovely. The music's great. Like, what is your problem?
Why are you? Yeah, like, what's wrong with you?
What's wrong with you?
So your position here would have been mine 5 days ago. Okay. Now I don't know. Like, this is like I said, I'm still thinking this one out.
Okay. I'm open to the anti-American thing. Except I don't read that so much. Healthcare debate is a bit of a distinction because I mean we've been inundated with all these terrible stories of people getting heart attacks and then having to suffer from bankruptcy afterwards. Like, I think it's a very specific thing. I think that Canada just likes the idea of the world being what we want it to be, and therefore, I think it's actually more deeply rooted than that.
I just think there's often been a sense in Canada that what the Americans do with their national security is weird, and they should stop and be more like us. Whereas we've never really thought that we can be like us because they do the weird thing. Right. And the more we're going to have to start doing stuff that the Americans do. I'm not talking about like invading the Middle East. Like, I'm just talking about like, we're probably going to need some spies. We're probably going to need to invest a lot more in surveillance. We're going to
need to start beefing up our security in the Arctic. You know what I mean?
But to do that is an admission that those weirdos that we look down on because we're smug might have had a point.
I think it's actually deeper than that. It's like, we don't want to spend money on something that is unpleasant to think about and feels very remote from the realities of our world. Feels very remote from our peaceful, happy little enclave in the universe.
For now.
For now.
I don't know.
And we're not going to change our minds on that until all of a sudden it becomes impossible to do otherwise.
I'm going to keep mulling this over.
Yeah.
You could be right. Like, this is still sort of like a proto thesis for me. I'm still thinking it out. I just think, like, if the Johnston report had come out and had been like, and had recommended we need to dramatically increase our number of botanists, you'd be like, oh, all right, well, we should probably get some more botanists. In the same way that saying we need more spies, ships, drones would have a very different reaction, because Canadians don't think that's the kind of thing Canada does. Our peacekeeper delusions, right? Honest brokers.
Yeah. There's so many people who are living in the peacekeeper delusion space.
The other point I wanted to make about Johnston, and again, it's a little bit adjacent to Johnston. It's not really about the report or anything. You and I live in a country that is effectively a transparency desert, right?
Oh, people don't actually understand this. I've tried to have conversations with people who think that America is much, much worse than us.
Eyes glazed over, no one cares.
And I'm like, no, America is 1,000 times better than us on every transparency measure, and it's not close.
No, and I mean, yeah, but also, like, I don't think the Americans are an outlier as to the good as much as we are an outlier to the bad. Most jurisdictions I've ever had any reason to request data from have been way better than Canada.
It's astonishing how poor almost every level of government is.
Well, Mitch Heimel argued this in his column on Thursday, right? Like, the default assumption of Canadian public policy, particularly defense policy, is you don't have a right to know that. Stop asking, peasant.
I mean, I'll make this point again, and every Canadian journalist who's worked for any length of time will tell you this, and that is, if I have a choice between calling up an American and calling up a Canadian on a story, I will call the American every goddamn time.
Yep.
Because if I call the Americans and be like, hey, can I talk to that FBI agent who worked on that case about cross-border drug smuggling? They'll be like, yeah, sure, we can get him on the phone 2:00 this afternoon. And he'll give you totally candid, in-depth conversation about everything. Great story, wonderful, love you, send you flowers. The equivalent would be, okay, well, please send an email request to the RCMP media at rcmp.ca. We'll forward it to you. And it's possible that we might be able to get an anodyne email statement back to you within the next week.
I've gotten to the point where I just reply to the statements going, thank you very much for this. Would you like to try that again and actually answer the questions, and we can just skip the boilerplate bullshit you just gave me? And I don't often get response. I'm too fucking old and tired to play nice. Like,
it's actually insane. It's like, I can't even begin to describe how awful it is here.
The reason I bring
from courts, police, obscure departments of even if you're trying to write something good about it, like, hey, I've heard that the federal government's working on this really cool program in fisheries where they're trying to, like, bring back cod stocks. Could you get me, like, the lead scientist on that? That would be amazing. They're like, sure, please put in your request, blah, 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 blah. And maybe 6 months later, some completely over-rehearsed bot of a scientist will come back to you after all the life and passion's been sucked out of him. You can't, it's unbelievable. And that's before we get into the FOIP stuff. That's just like the daily stuff's awful.
When I have a good media experience, I want to hit my knees in prayers of gratitude. Just like when someone gets back to me quickly with the requested information, what you normally get is ignored, and then you get an email the next day going, hey, we're working on this. What's your deadline? It's like, yesterday, asshole, I told you that. It was right in my first fucking email.
After the first Marshall Smith interview we did, that big Q&A, I put in a request to the BC government equivalent, and I said, hey, look, we just did this thing for Marshall Smith.
Yeah, I remember. You CC'd me.
Yeah, I was like,
we're still waiting.
We're still waiting.
Well, they'll get back to us in months from now, and they'll ask if we're still interested.
It's literally been months, and that's fine. I mean, they don't want to respond. That's fine.
Oh, no, they'll get back to us months from now, and they'll be like, hey, is this still a thing?
Oh, they've already done that. Do you still want to do this email? And I said, yes, I do.
So we've already done the stage 1 dysfunction.
Yeah.
Okay, then it's possible they're going to ignore us. Because they always do the stage 1 dysfunction. Now we'll see if they do stage 2.
Yeah.
The reason I bring this up in reference to Johnston between the Public Order Emergency Commission and even what relatively little we got in the Johnston report, we are getting almost unheard of looks behind the curtain of federal governance in this country.
And part of the reason why maybe they're just so secretive is because they're bluntly so incompetent. They can't let us see behind the curtain because then we're going to realize that it's just a man pulling strings pretending to be the wizard. Like maybe that's just it.
No, the
It's not
man
even
died a long time ago. There's just like a mummified husk.
Yeah. And maybe that's it. Like, maybe they're not necessarily corrupt, but they're just so utterly overwhelmed. Their systems have all atrophied to such an extent that they're just not competent. They can't technically be competent anymore. And they know that if they're actually as transparent about that fact as they would be in an American jurisdiction, any American jurisdiction, we'd riot.
Or we'd vote them out because the Americans have more direct democracy that way often than we do. Yeah, look, I mean, POEC was more in-depth, obviously, full public inquiry. But even what we got in like in the 5 relevant pages of the Johnston report, roughly pages, say, 17, 18 to about 22, 23, it is, look, I'm not going to narrate my column here. I don't need to repeat it at length. The exact same problem. It is a national security apparatus in this country that doesn't know what it's doing, doesn't know how to do, probably doesn't know what it wants to do, doesn't know how to do it even if they did, and probably doesn't know how to figure it out. And, I've been, the last couple of days, I've been hearing from a select number of current or former public servants, I'll put it that way. And they all want to explain to me the complexity of the system and the nuances of it and how I just don't understand because I've never been there. And my stock response is, guys, how long into your career were you when failure became normalized to the point where you don't believe in any meaningful way that better is possible? There is no shortage of bureaucrats in this country who want to explain to me why the dysfunction is unavoidable, natural, inherent. And there are exceptions, and God, I love them. But I'd have to, I don't have my, I mean, I'd be one of my binders next to me. Binders, just like how we
Maybe
were
that's the
national
dispatch.
security
Maybe
information.
maybe that's the dispatch. You responding to the bureaucrats in your DMs.
Yeah. I remember when I was reading POEC, like a fairly small part of like the entire massive Public Order Emergency Commission report was about the federal government response. But remember, I wrote that column in February basically saying like any semi-competent logistics manager at a mid-sized Canadian firm could overthrow the Canadian government.
Yep, that's right.
Johnston's report, like the 5 or 6 pages that are relevant, are echoing exactly that.
Yep.
And lest our friends in the national security sector feel picked on here, think of all like we can't build trains or subways, and the healthcare systems like an omni clusterfuck, and it's failure has been normalized. I think I told you recently, and
that's the line. Failure's been normalized.
I think I need to be vague about this because the event I was at was it was on background, but just listening to bureaucrats talking about kind of like their phase 1 effort and their phase 2 effort, and phase 1 was all internal behind the scenes stuff, and phase 2 was the forward facing public interacting stuff. And they were just talking about how phase 1 had been accomplished, but there'd been real implementation challenges with phase 2. And there was sort of this sense in the room that like, well, hey guys, great work on phase 1. Half marks. We're halfway there. Whereas my perspective as the outsider is, if the public facing part of this is a failure, the effort has failed. Because the operation was a complete success, but the patient died. It's like, and I tried to bring this up and I got some weird looks. Like,
that's because this goes back to the other column I was writing about that this aligns with, and that is you have people who lionize inputs but not outputs.
Yep.
You have people who talk about their job as being a selection of what goes into the sausage, but they're never measuring or looking at the actual output of the efforts of their work. They're not measuring or judging their sense of failure according to outcomes.
It's not relevant to their career trajectories.
That's right.
Their jobs are administering inputs. I couldn't remember.
I did my job because I met the KPI standard of hiring X number of people or acquiring this much information.
I spent the budget.
I spent the budget.
Yeah, like the Parliament of Canada allotted me X numbers of dollars this year, and I spent them.
Yeah, I did my job.
But the patient died. I couldn't remember who this was, and I've been racking my brain for a couple of days trying to think about it. You might remember this, and if not, I'm going to throw myself upon the listeners and the viewers here. Somebody said, and I don't remember who it was, and it's frustrating because I don't remember if it was like someone giving a TED talk or if it was like something I heard at a bar. If I heard it at a bar, the listeners probably aren't going to help me out of this. But someone is basically saying, like, when I hire you onto my team, you need to tell me what's broken in 60 days, because that's your window of opportunity. That is when you are useful as an outsider to be like, why are you doing this? This is really stupid. Because after 60 days, you're showing up every day, you're doing the stupid thing, you're punching the clock, and you're getting your paycheck.
And you've now normalized into the group mind.
There is a very narrow window of opportunity where someone is still an outsider who can see the ways in which a system is broken.
Right.
And the POEC report was showing us ways that our systems are broken. And the Johnston report, differently and more briefly, showing us the way things are broken. And there is nothing but current and former civil servants trying to explain to me how I don't get the nuance here. Guys, you're too immersed in this. I don't pretend to know how the intricacies of all these systems work. There's undoubtedly reams of stuff I've never even heard of here, but I can still look at a system that is not producing the desired outcome and go, well, that's fucked.
You've normalized failure. You're so ingratiated into the group mind that you can't step back from this and realize that the procedures and systems you've created are dysfunctional.
I worked for this company years ago. And this is before I was in media, but when I was trying to get into media, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, so I'll be vague. But I used to send my friends like almost real-time updates by email of what I was doing at my job, because what I was doing at my job was just insane. Like, it was a weirdly run environment. But it didn't take me long before I would just kind of show up in the morning, make my big thermos of tea, throw my coat over the chair, and start doing all the stupid shit. And then, hey, all right, lunchtime. and then come back and I'll do all the afternoon stupid shit. And nobody got hurt. Everybody got paid. Everybody went home. And eventually it was starting to drive me out of my mind, because I didn't want to spend my life like ticking stupid boxes in a meaningless process chart. But yeah, when you point out that a system that produces does not produce the desired outcome has failed, they look at you weird. And it's a combination of like surprise and resentment.
Don't you know how hard I'm working? Don't you know how hard I'm trying?
What we were talking about earlier, right?
That should be the Canadian national anthem. A lot of people work very hard on this, Matt.
You remember years ago when
we worked really hard?
Well, no, you're barely joking, because
I'm not joking.
Were you one of the posties who got the complaint emails from CBC Comedy?
Yes.
Right, tell that story.
A bunch of us, so a bunch of us, because we're monsters, we're bad people. Excuse, my son is flushing the toilet. A lot of us posties were just making fun of how bad CBC Comedy was on Twitter, and we were just being shitheads. Like, this sucks. And a bunch of us got these. You weren't being personally crass or anything. No. We were making fun of the content. We weren't naming the authors or anything like that. We were just like, this isn't funny. It's just, we were making more fun of the jokes than the jokes were funny. And a bunch of us got this email from one of the producers, I think, basically saying, a lot of us have been trying really hard. So maybe just think about that next time you're teasing us at CBC Comedy. It literally was that. And I'm like, that right there is Canada in a nutshell.
I've said my piece. Do you want to walk me through whatever the frig's happening in Alberta?
Yeah, I'm not even paying attention to the polls, bluntly, because I have no idea.
Okay,
So
I
you
make
had
no
mentioned
predictions.
no predictions.
Making predictions about Alberta elections a mug's game, but the
Look,
polls
and
seem to be
also,
improving for the Conservatives.
sure, which wouldn't surprise me. Also, it's 50-50. 50% of the time the polls are spot on and 50% of the time they're not. So who knows what to make of it? I don't. Also, I think just final decision making is not going to happen until basically this weekend for a lot of undecided voters.
Let me ask you this question then, and this
Mhm.
is me again as an outsider. I'm going to ask you the same question twice, but I'm going to reverse the hypothesis.
Okay.
What happens to Rachel Notley and the NDP if Smith wins?
Well, probably a not terribly dissimilar thing that would happen to her even if she won, and that is she has to start building the infrastructure of that party and creating a successor. So I think she has to do that whether or not she wins or loses, because, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to Rachel Notley, but I think she's kind of reaching the point in her career where she should be aging into the elder statesperson role for this party. So I think she would have to start mentoring Shannon Phillips or someone like that to take over and build their profile while doing a lot of things that they haven't done. I mean, the NDP actually is very well funded. They've out fundraised the UCP almost every quarter for years now. They've got tons of resources to be running a very competitive race. But from my understanding, their ground game's pretty limited. Their volunteer lists aren't what they should be. They've basically run an election almost totally on air war and haven't really devoted the amount of time and energy they've needed to on just the dirt, ugly, get voters out to the polls, identify your support, get your voters out to the polls, which is where most elections are won and lost, and where the
What are they spending their money on? Like, if they've got all this money,
it's a lot of ads. They've done a lot of air war is essentially where I think they're spending all their ads. And honestly, I mean, considering the amount of time that they've had, they could have been running full tilt 6 months ago, and they really weren't. And that was always really weird. I don't think they've run a particularly strong campaign. And I think Notley will probably not be leader if for much longer if she doesn't win this campaign. But that being said, I think she probably I have a hard time imagining she would contest another election anyway, just because I think she's hitting that point in her career where she's just kind of aging out of this. That's my sense, honestly. I don't know how many fights she's got left in her. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she's willing to go to the wall until she's like Hazel McCallion style, right? Like good for her if so. But I think that there's deeper systemic stuff that need to be put in place to take the NDP out from being Rachel Notley's party, because Rachel Notley is personally very popular, and making it a sustainable, competitive alternative to the UCP in a much longer term way. And I think that that's the work she would need to be devoting herself to, and succession planning should be part of that work. But I think that that's the same answer either way for them.
Let's flip it then. What happens to the UCP and Danielle Smith if Notley wins?
Basically, it's the same answer, and that is Danielle Smith's probably going to be facing a leadership election within 2 years, because the conservative side of this province are a bunch of bitches who love drama. Unless she wins just a strong blowout majority, which at this point I don't see the polls as making possible, she is going to have a struggle to deliver what the most ardent and extreme supporters who put her in power want and expect from her. And sooner or later, they're going to start carping. She's going to continue to make gaffes. She's going to become unpopular. I mean, the usual things are going to happen, and she's going to face a leadership.
How many do you need
challenge.
to win? Is it 45 out of 87? You need 44 and a speaker.
It's 44 and a speaker. That's right.
So if she gets the 45, is she safe in her career?
Oh, God, no. Oh, God, no. But I don't think that she would be safe in her career if she got 50. You know what I mean? I mean, I was going to save this for my Globe column and come out of this, but I had a really interesting conversation actually last night with somebody in the UCP ranks and trying to talk to them about, who are you going to vote for? And I was like, well, I got to vote for my team, sort of thing. I'm like, but you're not you're clearly physically uncomfortable with Danielle Smith. He's like, no, I think she's not right. And I'm like, okay, and what about her policies? And he's like, no, I would agree with you that cutting to income taxes and putting the tax referendum, that's terrible policy. Like, I totally agree with you. That's insane. Okay.
So what are
And
you voting for?
so what are you voting for? And he's like, well, you don't understand. She'll be gone in 18 months. I was like, okay. And this is someone who is very much from the red Tory side, the PC side, not from the far right side. His logic was, well, the David Parker Take Back Alberta people, they'll take her out within 18 months and then we can put someone new in there. And I'm like, okay. And who are you going to put in there? The answer was, well, Travis Taves, someone like that. I'm like, Travis Taves, who didn't win the last election, couldn't marshal enough support to do that against not even a particularly very competitive race, by the way. Rebecca Schultz, oh, what did she come in, like 5th, 6th? Like, your people didn't come out for her then. Oh, well, maybe Jason Kenney will come back. Jason Kenney, that's gone real well.
Does anyone know where he is? Like, what happened to him?
I think he's doing boards and stuff like that. I still pin my hopes on him becoming a monk. I think that would be a great answer for him. But no, boards, he's going to make money on boards, I think. But, I just tried to, I couldn't wrap my head around his logic, because I'm like, just so that we're clear, as my husband put it to me yesterday, to quote Lenin, the army has voted with its feet. All of these sort of PC people who are still, plugging their sense of identity to the existing UCP don't seem to understand that they've lost their party. There's not enough of them. They're not interested or engaged enough to put a sensible, quote unquote, candidate in Smith's replacement. So if the Take Back Alberta guys do oust her, which I think is pretty likely just because of the drama of that team, the incentives are all going to push them towards someone just as nuts.
Or nutser.
There's no, they're now riding the dragon, right?
Oh, yeah.
And there actually isn't a politically powerful enough centrist faction within that party to hold. It's not there anymore. They've lost the party. This is not their father's PC party anymore. And you can see a lot of the people who can't quite fathom that, can't quite wrap their head around that. They're not there yet. They don't quite get it yet. And
remember a few weeks ago, we were talking about Ken Bosencool had written a column for us. He actually wrote another one for us, but he'd written one for us, I guess about a month ago. And one of the points I made on our podcast at the time was that John Michael McGrath, my colleague at TVO here in Toronto, had basically read the column and quote tweeted it and just basically said, Ken's side lost.
Yeah.
And as I said in the podcast when I was talking about this, my response was very similar to McGrath's, except I kind of viewed it differently. Whereas I described it to you as I'm further along in the grieving process than Ken is. Ken hadn't gotten to the acceptance stage yet.
Yep.
The person you were talking to last night, had I, or whenever it was, I probably would have had the same response to that person as I had reading Ken's column, which is, I think I mostly agree with you. I think probably my politics, your politics are probably aligned on this, but we lost. Guys like us with our worldview were the ascendant faction within conservative politics in this country for a good long run, but we're not. And I suspect we will be again, but no time soon. It's the other guys get a turn for a while. And either through victory or failure, this is going to have to just work its way out. I was talking in a different context, very, very similar to this, about kind of Polyev, because someone was commenting on his refusal to take the classified briefing. You and I actually were taking pot shots at each other on Twitter about this. I think you should take the briefing because I think leaders show up. And I think if you can't figure out a way to criticize the government because Trudeau is like Jedi mind tricked you into a secrecy oath, then you're an idiot. But I still think, and I'm trying to tell people this, I'm getting tired of having to explain to people just because somebody's going to make bad policy doesn't mean it's fantastic politics. And I think Polyev, Smith, others are better attuned to where the national mood is than a lot of these people, whether it's David Johnston or this person, old guard Alberta Tory you were talking to. I don't think people have noticed the change. And
no, and also there's a sort of a degree of sort of intellectual self-dealing that's happening where they're just like, well, yes, everything about what's happening around me is crazy, but I can justify this because she'll be gone in 2 years. So it'll be fine. It'll be fine, right?
now, is that a justification to stay sane or a justification to vote for the party?
It's a justification to stay with the party.
Or maybe both.
Maybe both, but like that's if the UCP win, I think that's probably what did it. It would be enough of those people said, well, you know, okay, I disagree with everything that's happening here, but they'll probably just kick her out soon anyway, so it won't matter. Consequences or no.
So I can
Without
vote for it
realizing-
and then disavow any responsibility for it because, hey, I
Exactly.
only voted for her because I figured she was
I
going
figured
out.
she was going out. That's exactly what the logic and the rationale that's happening. And I think that is absolutely idiotic and insane because you've already established all the incentives are going to lead you further down this particular spiral, and what replaces her will not be better because the incentives are aligned against it, especially if she wins, right? The only way that the party recovers itself is if she loses and is kicked out.
Yeah.
And basically the electorate rejects this.
If they
that's
win,
not gonna
they're
happen.
emboldened in victory. If
That's
they
right.
lose, the conclusion is they weren't crazy enough.
That's right. That's
so
correct.
The next person will really go nuts.
Yep, that's right. So look, the only, if you actually were trying to recreate some modern version of like the sensible centrist PC party,
couldn't do it. There's no appetite for it.
Well, maybe you could, maybe you couldn't. But I mean, Alberta's a bit of a different space, but you're certainly not going to do it after Danielle Smith ekes out a win.
Yeah. Oh, you know, but people will try if she loses, but what they're going to find out is that they're going to raise tens and tens of dollars, but someone's going to show up in a cowboy hat somewhere and go, we're going to fucking take the province back. It's going, yeah.
No, but I'm saying the only
energy always goes to the fringe.
Yeah, but that hasn't always been the case. I mean, the PC party managed to keep itself afloat for 44 years. Their track record is pretty impressive, and they have a high degree of brand loyalty among pretty sensible Albertans who never really viewed them as terribly ideological, but for the most part, pretty good governors.
Why is Smith running the party?
Because the Wild Rose won.
Yeah.
The Wild Rose won the Civil War.
That's what I'm saying. The energy went to the fringe.
So anyway, the only way that those people win it back, and I don't think you're right, I don't think that they could win it back right now because I just don't think they have the energy and momentum for them. But the only way that could happen is if the party loses. And a lot of these conservatives are forced to go back into basically spend a little bit of time in the wilderness, come to terms with why they lost, come to terms with the fact the electorate is not with them on the crazy right stuff, and reforms itself from within. But if they win, then all the incentives point toward crazy, and that's where it's going to go.
Won't happen. And I'm going to tell you why it won't happen. Conservatives in defeat will not go back to the ridings and think long and hard. They're going to go back to their ridings and disappear into their social media echo chambers. And they're going to hang out in church basements and Legion halls with people who are in those same echo chambers. And they're going to have no problem raising money and getting.
And as long as the Alberta electorate continues to reject that as a whole, it's a losing strategy for them. Sooner or later, they're going to want to win again.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, but it's going to be later.
Maybe, yes. But I'm saying as long as they continue to win with the crazy, they'll continue to be crazy because that's where the incentives lie.
Yeah, and then even when they start to lose with the crazy, they're going to have to lose repeatedly with the crazy.
Yeah, I agree. But anyway, the NDP map we all know is very hard.
Yeah.
It's a difficult win for them, and I think they've on their side. I don't laud their campaign. I think they've run a very weak campaign. I think the lack of sort of organization that I see from the NDP, the lack of volunteerism, the lack of just being present has been really striking to me. And also, it's not exactly like Rachel Notley's come out with some really great visionary policy, right? She hasn't. Like the policies that have been proposed on both sides have been pretty weak. So in the absence of that, people are going to default to the conservative because that's going to be where the psychological default is.
Yeah, that's where the center of gravity is.
That's where the center of gravity is. They've got the easier map. And the people who are wary about Daniel Smith and conservative are going to do exactly what that dude said. And that says, well, yeah, I disagree with everything, but you know what? I can justify this because they'll just, the crazies will kick her out eventually.
This is one of those lessons where no matter how many times it punches us in the face, people are always surprised by it.
Mm-hmm.
After a political civil war, the losers make their peace with the new regime. Few of them don't. They leave, they go to the private sector, or they go form some splinter party that never gets anywhere. But most of the people, most of the time, will make their peace with the new boss because they want to win.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron O'Toole had a total lock on the Conservative Party until he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And all those O'Tooleites, the 1/3 of the caucus roughly that voted against the Reform Act effort to purge him, heard from them lately? They all fell in line.
Yes.
They always do.
Yes, do.
And you got to manage by fact, right? Like,
so what do we want my dispatch to be here? Because I don't want to predict the outcome. Like I really
overtly don't predict the outcome because that never
because that doesn't go well in Alberta.
You know what? Honestly, I don't know, but I'm going to encourage you to sleep on that and just.
Yeah, I'll sleep on it and think what I want to say. And also, I don't know if we want. Like I said, it sounds like our dispatch is going to be thin. It probably the Alberta stuff's going to need to be folded into the dispatch, which is fine. But yeah, I mean, what the outcome? Look, the part of me that is an absolute chaos demon and lives and thrives on chaos energy, which is 90% of me at this point, just sheer atavistic. Bring me the drama. No, I'm hoping for like it's going to be like 43-43.
And like one weirdo independent.
With one weirdo independent, like Raj Sherman isn't the independent, because that would be the absolute great one. Also, we said something stupid.
Or like one person has to resign instantaneously because of like a DWI or something, so that you end up with a perfectly balanced.
Yeah. Already Alberta, what is it? Because we said something wrong and we're gonna get called on it. So it's 87 members. So it's 44 to the majority, right?
Yeah, we were right. 44 plus a
40,
speaker.
No, 44 is the majority. So the speaker's got to come out of the 44 if it's 44.
Yes, but that's why you want 45, because then you get your speaker and your 44 to outgun the remaining opposition.
But my good answer here is like 44-43, plus they got to lose one to the speaker, and then like Raj Sherman winds up being the weirdo and who actually decides the balance of power. Like that's the answer I want. I want Chief Pure Cow being attacked.
No, I think I am, because when we paused the recording, I showed him one of my son's big Nerf guns, so I think he's not packing now. A couple quick things to mention here, then we'll wrap this up before your son goes totally bonkers.
Jamie, mommy is almost finished. Okay,
almost done, buddy. We're almost
done. You need to let mommy finish her thing. Okay, mommy's working.
We wanted.
Do you have anything to say about the Alberta election, sweetie? Yeah. That's a good answer. That's an excellent answer. Okay,
we wanted to make a point of thanking here, and we will in writing as well, Gordon Gibson, who recently made a generous donation to the line, and he actually did it to sponsor a series of people to get year-long subscriptions. It was a wonderful idea. We did not seek this out. He contacted us and offered us the opportunity to provide year-long subscriptions at full freight for a lot of people, and we wanted to just make a point explicitly of saying thank you, because that obviously was very flattering for us, and it's meaningful for us. It helps us grow our business, so we wanted to offer our thank you to Mr. Gibson for that. And we also wanted to just say we are hosting our first live in-person event. There's still a lot of logistics to figure out about this. We're looking to do it in the fall. We'll be doing it in Toronto. We're hoping to go and do more of them, but Toronto is going to be our inaugural, so to speak, where we try to learn the ropes a little bit. We have been encouraged to find sponsors for this. We have never sought or accepted any sponsorship or advertising. The only contributions in kind that the line has ever accepted has been professional services, people who have assisted us at a discounted rate or even donated their time to help us with legal matters, accounting matters, getting incorporated, things like that. we've had a ton of support for people who've believed in us and supported our vision here. But in terms of an actual financial consideration, we never have before. So we are now purely as an event sponsor for our first event, which we hope will be in Toronto in the fall. Make us an offer, folks.
No, we actually don't know if we can make a profit on these events. Like, period. We're so new to this. We don't know how many people will come out to it. We don't know if we can make money off of it. So we're looking for potentially sponsors to help offset the cost of hosting the event, having people over, seeing if we can actually make cash on it, if it's worthwhile for us to do. So if you have been in a position where you thought, hey, we really like the line, would like an opportunity to throw some money at you, this would be a great way to do it. I mean, even relatively small amounts of money, we would be totally great with talking with you about if that's something that interests you.
$4.
Well, it would probably have to be more than $4, but
hey, come on,
but like we're not being extravagant in our ambitions here. Let's just put it that way. We're being pretty conservative in our ambitions here. So I mean, this is just, hey, if you're a sponsor, if you're looking for some kind of recognition event, maybe you want to sponsor some drinks. At the event, we would let it be known that, hey, this dude over here or this lady over here, she paid for a round of drinks for you. Like stuff like that. If that interests you, please just send us an email and let us know.
Well, I think obviously we'll mention that in the dispatch, and as we do firm up, I got to read over that contract. I got to sign the damn thing.
Yes, please do. Normally, I'm the one who's bad at signing contracts.
It's been a busy week. I knew the Johnston report was coming out. I don't know why it caught me so flat-footed, but it did. That's it.
And I think the piece was great, by the way. I thought that was really, really good.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it was my headline where I call it really depressing. That was not tongue in cheek. Like, that report was a really, it's funny because here we are. I'm not going to extend the podcast here. We're trying to wrap it up. I know that people have been saying the Johnston report is a whitewash or it's an exoneration of the Liberals. Anyone who's concluding that hasn't read past like the first 5 paragraphs. If you get into the meat of that report, what you are presented with is just an astonishingly bleak portrait of Canadian governance in action. It's bad and it's upsetting.
But that's why it's a whitewash, because that is being used as an excuse. That's what's being used to exonerate them. The fact that Johnston may or may not be aware that he's presenting as bleak a picture as he is, I don't think excuses that.
I said to you before we started rolling, I think maybe I just speak Laurentian better than some people do.
It's possible. I mean, you are a monster, so.
It's just like, there is almost no, I'm unusual for my willingness to just call a spade a spade. And Canadians are very polite, equivocating people. It's part of our charm, but I think it's also a real problem. And Johnston is I would even say extraordinarily polite in describing these catastrophically embarrassing failures. But read the report. Strip away the refined, dignified persona of the man telling us how fucked we are, and what you're left with is how fucked we are. I think one of the things that we have always said to people at the line is we will not always be right. We'll make mistakes. We'll draw the wrong conclusions, but we won't lie to you. And I think that has to include a degree of bluntness, if only to counteract the prevailing Canadian mannerisms here. And it's funny. It's amazing how often I get told how refreshing it is, like when I go on a radio interview or something. And I'm not hamming it up. It's just kind of like, Matt, what's your read of the report? My read of the report is that we've got major problems that we aren't fixing. People are like, wow. I'm just saying it like it is. Americans are better at this than we are. Americans see failure and they call it failure. Remember what the Liberals had a few years ago? I don't mean this in a partisan way, but I thought it wasn't a Liberal problem. It was a perfectly Canadian problem where the Liberals in their first mandate came out with a report card, and they described failures as underway with challenges. That was don't
you know how hard we're trying?
Underway with
trying
challenges.
lots of people have put a lot of effort into this. You should think twice about criticizing it.
I will
Why
write the
don't you
Johnston
just be
blurbs.
nice? Just
I
be
will write.
nice. We're
I will write.
trying. We're trying. Trying. So hard. I can't you just be nice?
I will write the Johnston blurbs, but can you write me even a paragraph or two of the CBC comedy experience that I will fold into my Johnston blurbs? Because you were involved in that, I wasn't. I remember it, but I didn't get the.
It was all published on Canada Land.
Was it?
Mm-hmm. A bunch of us.
Because you, Chris Selly, Tristan Hopper.
It was literally you could not have picked worse people to send this particular plea for mercy to. It was almost as if she had like identified the people who would only find amusement in her pleas for kindness and contempt. Yeah.
It's funny.
It was very funny.
All right. You want to wrap it here?
Yeah.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.